Yeah, doggy. I can't wait to trade for Deandre Ayton. He's going to lead us to a championship. We're going to win the Western Conference now. I can't... What the hell? Not so fast there, buckaroo. Deandre Ayton is fool's gold. You're tricking yourself. He's not going to help you win. $30 million for that? I don't think so, buckaroo. Think again. Okay, all right, let's talk about Deandre Ayton. Deandre Ayton dominating, which he famously and hilariously dubbed himself after getting asked whether or not he has motor issues. And Deandre Ayton basically said, motor issues? I don't even know what a motor is. I have a Tesla battery. They call me Dominating, which I think was directly after one of the Nuggets games where Jock Landale just completely and totally outplayed him and out-hustled him. That's neither here nor there. We're talking about Deandre Ayton today because his name has been brought up. It was a huge topic of conversation on Twitter today because reports were going around that on draft night, the Suns and Mavericks were pretty deep in conversations regarding a trade for Ayton, and that the Mavericks offered JaVale McGee, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Rashawn Holmes, but the Suns balked at the inclusion of JaVale McGee, which kind of insinuates that they were pretty interested in Tim Hardaway and Rashawn Holmes. And if Mark Stein is saying this, I very much believe it to be true. So it kind of sounds like Tim Hardaway Jr. for Rashawn Holmes is something that could have and could potentially still happen for Deandre Ayton, and that's led to quite a lot of debate and conversation. Well, why the fuck would the Suns do that? I'll talk about that here in a second. Why trade Ayton if his value is that low? I'll talk about that here in a second. And why did the Mavericks not do this? Why did the Mavericks not just do the trade regardless of JaVale McGee? I'll talk about this here in a second as well. First and foremost, the Mavericks side of things. You want JaVale McGee in the trade. That way you can have access to the full mid-level exception. If it was just Rashawn Holmes and Tim Hardaway Jr., you would still have to find somebody to take on McGee's contract or Reggie's contract, whatever the case may be, in order to have access to your mid-level exception. Or you would need Kyrie to take a pretty significant pay cut in the first year of his deal in order to have the mid-level exception. But I've already seen people say, well, who gives a fuck? Like, Ayton is already better than any of the players you get for the mid-level exception. I guess let me just start this video with this hot take, because it's going to set the tone. I would much rather have Tim Hardaway Jr. and a mid-level guy than Ayton at $30 million a year, easily. Like, it's not, like, I don't even have to think about it. I don't even have to consider it, easily. Why is that? I watch a lot of Phoenix Suns games. I watch a lot of Deandre Ayton. I know exactly who the fuck that guy is. I know who he is. I know the player he is. I know the player he's been, okay, over the past couple of seasons. I'm not talking about what he could be. I'm not talking about the tiny glimpses. I know who he is as a player, what he has shown us to be. If the contract wasn't as steep as it is, $30 million over the next 3 years, I think that's a lot. People said it's not. That is. That's a lot. He's the 6th highest paid center in the NBA right now. Just looking at who's going to be hitting the open market over the next few years at the center position, like, I can't imagine anybody gets more than $30 million per year anytime soon, right? And it was reported today that Sabonis, his contract negotiations with the Kings, he's looking at about $30 million a year, which puts him in that Ayton price range. That's a lot of money, man. Yeah, 3 years, that I know that's not a lot, but that kind of perfectly coincides with the Luka extension, right? Mavericks have basically 3 years until Luka opts out of his player option and unrestricted free agency hits. So this $30 million contract you're taking on for Ayton will pretty much be here the rest of Luka Doncic's contract. That would mean you would have about $110 million tied into Luka, Kyrie, and Ayton. Let's just start with this, because I've seen people say, oh, well, Ayton's like a top 5 center, top 6, top 7 center. No, he's fucking not, all right? Ayton's maybe a top 10 center, and I say maybe. Let's just look at who's better than him, okay? Jokic, Embiid, Bam, AD, Gobert, Cat, Miles Turner, Sabonis. No conversations to be had there. That's what, 7 guys who are just automatically better than Ayton. All right, now we get to the guys who I personally think are better, but some people might have some arguments. Nick Claxton, Wendell Carter Jr., Walker Kessler, fuck it, Brook Lopez. And then you have like the Capellas and the Vucevic's, where I think Ayton's probably better than those guys at this point, but you know what? You could talk me into it. And keep in mind, this is the 6th highest paid guy in the league at the center position, $33 million a year on average. But okay, what about the reported trade? Like, you're not giving up a lot. It's just Rashawn Holmes and JaVale McGee, who knows if those guys are even going to be in your rotation, and Tim Hardaway Jr., who I personally think is a pretty valuable guy, right? His volume shooting, his efficiency, that's not something that is easily defined across the NBA. People might think it is, but it's really not. Like, if you were to get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr., you need to be replacing him with somebody. You need to be replacing that shot production from somebody. I've seen some people say those packages, that's risk-free. crazy. Like, you're getting a very good asset, a young asset, a good player who's under contract. You're getting that for basically risk-free. Again, I disagree. If it's not including JaVale McGee, you don't have access to your mid-level exception. Again, I'd rather have Tim Hardaway Jr. and a mid-level guy than Deandre Ayton at this point in time. I just would. Now, if you include JaVale McGee into the mix and you can get Ayton and you get access to your full mid-level exception, okay, I would probably be okay with that. I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't hate it. I don't love Ayton. I think that you're really going all in on this, and I'll talk about why here in a second. You will be going all in. It will be hard to undo something like this. If you're wondering why the fuck the Suns would do a deal like that, well, they need depth, and it's clear and obvious that Ayton's value is in the absolute toilet right now. Why is Ayton's value in the toilet? You might be wondering to yourself. Well, let's look at some numbers, right? You look at his box score. 18 points a game, 10 rebounds. One of only 14 guys in the league this year to average a double-double. You look at those stats and you say, oh, wow, he's really good. I don't think there's a player in the NBA whose box score does not match the actual on-court production and the eye test quite like DeAndre Ayton's. I don't think one exists. I hearken back to a game against the Mavericks. I think it was in February. Maybe it was in the end of January. Luka gets hurt, right? Mavericks versus the Suns. This is before the Kyrie Irving trade. Luka hurts his ankle, I believe, 3 minutes into the game, misses the entire rest of the game. Keep in mind, up until this point, the Mavericks were 0-7 in games that Luka Doncic did not play. They go on to beat the Suns in Phoenix, thanks due in large part to DeAndre Ayton. Yeah, he was the best player in the game for the Dallas Mavericks. Do you want to know what his final stat line was? 19 points and 20 rebounds. Damn near a 20-20 game. You look at that and you say, holy shit, Ayton dominated. He was garbage. He was absolutely awful in that game. Which, again, I don't know if a player exists in the NBA where their stats do not line up with actual production more than DeAndre Ayton. The flaws with him are apparent. He is consistently inconsistent. He is an incredibly soft player. His offensive game just does not align with what you would expect from a player of his size, of his strength, of his athleticism. Heavily reliant on mid-range jumpers, heavily reliant on finishing below the rim, which doesn't make any sense. 1.36 points per shot. That might sound pretty good, but it's 36th amongst centers with at least 1,000 minutes. And I think there's only 44 centers that qualify. The only centers worse than him in that stat shot at least 2 threes per game. Everybody except Isaiah Hartenstein. Ayton does not shoot threes. That's not in his repertoire. So every center that had a worse point per shot statistic than him, which is a very important efficiency stat, all shot threes, something that Ayton does not do. 28% of his shots at the rim were unassisted. That's 43rd out of 44 centers with 1,000 minutes. The only center he's better than in that stat is Dwight Powell. Now, admittedly, I could sort of look past this stat just because he played in a very pick and roll heavy offense, and for a center, pick and roll guys, whatever, I'm cool with that. But keep in mind, this guy's making $30 million a year. This is not a mid-level guy. This is not a guy you're debating about paying $20 million for. This is a $30 million a year player. And only Dwight Powell has less unassisted shots at the rim among centers than him. Dwight fucking Powell. He shot 8.7 mid-range jumpers per 75 possessions this year, which I believe was top 15, top 16 in the entire NBA. Only Bam and Embiid averaged more centers. Ayton shot 46% on these jumpers, Bam shot 47%, and Embiid shot 50%. So the shot diet to me is shocking, right? And this is a player who, again, making $30 million, but also a player who, he wants touches. He wants the offense to go through him. If you watch the Suns play, if you watch Ayton play, it's kind of clear and obvious what happens. If he's not involved in offense, if he's not getting touches, if he's not shooting shots, he is not checked in defensively, okay? And that's not a player that excites me. I'm like, woohoo! Another fucking player who wants the ball in his hands, but doesn't need the ball in his hands. Woo! I love those guys. The more guys I could get on my team like that, the better. Let's talk about his defense. Nowhere near as good this year as it was in years past. And I will admit, in years past, it was really good. 2021, he was good defensively. He was a very big reason why that Phoenix Suns team made it to the finals. But let's talk about that, right? Because that's his call. Like that's what he can hang his hat on. Third year in the league. He plays really well defensively. They make the finals. Let's dive a little bit deeper. In that postseason, the Suns played a crippled Lakers team, a half-dead Nuggets team, and I'll touch on that a little bit more here in a second, and an incapacitated Clippers team. They didn't play a team that was even remotely close to healthy in that postseason stretch. And to his defense, Jokic said himself after that series that Ayton did a very good job guarding him. But you look at the stark contrast between the 2021 postseason and the 2023 postseason, in which Ayton was getting torched so badly defensively that Jock Landale came in and was much better than Ayton was. 2021, the second best player on that Nuggets team, offensively at least, was Will fucking Barton. Will Barton was the second best offensive threat on that team, man. But again, I will say he was pretty good. He did a pretty good job against that Clippers small ball unit that they played in that postseason that absolutely torched Rudy Gobert. But again, that was more so the Jazz fault as a team than Gobert specifically, but he did a pretty good job. Like, he was pretty good that postseason. That showed us what Ayton could be. But why haven't we seen that since? Like, does that not concern anybody else, man? Like, why has that disappeared? Where has that gone? We talked about how soft he plays on offense. He plays very soft on defense too. Like, he gets pushed around by bigger guys, which really, again, you look at him, you look at this guy, he looks like an athletic freak. This type of stuff shouldn't be happening, man. He gets in foul trouble all of the time. He has such a hard time defending without foul trouble. He spends 7% of all of his games in foul trouble. That's an actual stat that you can look up. 7% of the game he spends in foul trouble, which puts him in the 9th percentile. This past season, on and off numbers can be wonky, especially just over a one season sample size, so I'll just throw that out there. But over this past season, the Suns defense was 4 points better per 100 possessions when Deandre Ayton was off of the court. His on-off stuff just as a whole this past season was terrible. Like, absolutely horrible. Like, you look up and down, you pair, like, okay, what did Chris Paul's numbers look like alongside Bismack Biyombo? Oh my God, the Suns were way better when it was Chris Paul and Bismack Biyombo than they were when it was Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. The same thing could be said for Devin Booker and, like, Jock Landale. It's like, why is this happening this year? Like, what's going on? This guy's making $30 million. Like, I have to continuously point that out. This isn't a $15 million a year guy where you could look past some of his flaws. $30 million a year. I don't know, man. He has a questionable motor. This is something that was with him in college. Okay. In the pre-draft process, that was like, he was seen as like a pretty safe prospect, but that was like one of the things, the questionable motor that has popped up all of the time. And I get scared of guys like that. I do. I worry about guys like that because you think you can fix it, but hey, sometimes you just can't. That's just how some of these guys are hard. Some of these guys, like, they're born to play basketball because of their athleticism and their size, but sometimes they just don't, like, they don't really want to like that. And that's okay. That's fine. But I worry about guys like that. I worry about guys where it's just like, why did his coach hate his guts? I worry about that. Why do his teammates, there's this YouTube channel, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it like uses hot mics, it talks about all of the different disagreements teams get into and shit like that. And I don't really look into this. I try not to look into stuff like this because it's basketball and you just know if you've ever played it, like, you're going to get screamed at, you're going to get yelled at, things get intense, right? You're going to have disagreements amongst teammates. That shit happens in any team sport. But if you go on this YouTube channel and you just search Deandre Ayton, there's like a million videos of him getting screamed at by Chris Paul, by Devin Booker, by Kevin Durant. Again, whatever, but there's like a lot of them for Deandre Ayton. And again, like, why did Monty Williams hate him? That scares me. Here's a quote from Gambadoro, Gambo, as Suns fans refer to him as. They treat this guy like he's Jesus Christ. Here's an actual quote from him. As far as Deandre Ayton, Monty didn't want him either. He wanted them to trade him to Indiana for Miles Turner. Well, of course, duh. He didn't like coaching Ayton. When Ayton signed his maximum contract when the Suns matched his offer sheet, Monty wasn't even there and didn't show up when Ayton signed it at the arena or call him to say congratulations. Monty's a good coach and a player's coach, but he's a player's coach for the players he likes. But he wasn't in on Jay Crowder in this instance, and DeAndre. Yeesh. I don't like that. I'm just going to say it. I don't enjoy that. Okay, but let's just say you feel somewhat confident that the Mavericks or whatever other team could be trading for Ayton could get the most out of him. They could bring him back to where he was in 2021, where it legitimately did look like, oh my God, Ayton's going to be a top 5 center for the next decade. You're running a big risk. Because what if he's not? What if you can't rehab his value? What if you can't raise his value? What if it's the same thing? What if it's more inconsistent play from him and more rumblings about, oh God, like, he's not the easiest guy to coach? What happens next? Because I've already seen Mavs fans say, well, they could just move on from him later. They could just salary dump him later. That's easier said than done. Like, that is much easier said than done. The Suns are already having troubles trading this guy right now. Like, they are desperate to move him for role players, for depth pieces. We're not talking about a young star player they want in return. We're not talking about 5 first-round picks. They just want depth guys. And it's not concerning to anybody else that there's not teams out there jumping on this. There's not teams that could use a young center, or these younger teams that are like fuck it, whatever. I'll bring in the money. I don't really care. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if it works out, it'd be great. Why are none of these teams lining up to go and get Ayton? Why? Why are the Suns considering Tim Hardaway Jr. and Rashawn Holmes If that's Ayton's value right now, can you imagine what would happen if you do trade for him and fast forward a few months, it's not working out at all? What's his value going to be then? It's going to be in the trash can. And now you have a $30 million player on the books right after you just drafted a center 12th overall. I don't know. I'm just here to say that this is a risky venture. Okay, it wouldn't be this huge slam dunk, no doubt about it, home run that I've seen a lot of fans make it out to be. It would be risky. I'm not saying it wouldn't pay off because it easily could, right? It could be a change of scenery thing. It doesn't always work out like that. Like these change of scenery guys, they're not automatic. It's not like, oh, we changed scenery, now we're good to go. Listen, man, it could definitely work out. It could be a huge home run swing and you could connect, but if it misses, it's going to be bad. Like I want people to understand that this isn't some risk-free move. It could be bad, like very bad if this doesn't pan out. And yeah, like a Luka and Ayton pick and roll would be disgusting. It just would. Like Luka pick and rolls with pretty much anybody are usually amazing, but it would be really good with Ayton. And in theory, you know, he's anchoring your defense. He's a center that you know you can play in the playoffs because we've seen it, even though last year he did get benched. But you know what? Whatever, you could brush that aside as, oh my God, Jokic was killing everybody. Okay, sure. But this is a guy who like wants touches. He wants shots. He wants the ball in his hands. It helps him be more engaged offensively and defensively. And that's not going to happen. Like that wouldn't be what he's getting on a team like Dallas. Maybe on like a rebuilding team or a younger team where it's just like, fuck it, yeah, give Deandre Ayton the ball. We don't care. Like somebody has to shoot. I don't know, man. Interesting to see how this all plays out. Because again, if it's Tim and Rashawn Holmes, like if that's really a package that could work out, yeah, this is going to be discussed. This is going to be brought back up. I don't think we've seen the end of this saga for Deandre Ayton, and I don't know what to expect. I don't know if he's going to be on the team, on the Suns next year. I don't know where the hell he's going to be, but I just want to throw out there, this isn't some like no doubt about it, easy, safe pick here in Deandre Ayton. You're getting a risky player, you're getting a very expensive player, and you're getting a player who the team that he's on clearly wants to get rid of him. That scares me. Does that not scare you guys?